So when I first started out getting interested in vegetable gardening and things like that, one of the things that I really struggled with, and one of the terms I didn't really know what it meant, was actually permaculture. And I never really heard, in fact I hadn't heard of what permaculture was when I was 14, before I'd actually started YouTube and gardening, blogging and things like that. So that's why today I'm going to speak about what permaculture is, and maybe some of its principles I might mention along the way as well. And generally just give you a bit of a definition, because I know how difficult it was when I started gardening about what all these terms were. So that's what I'm starting with today, is the word permaculture and what it means to us gardeners. Before this video gets started, I'd really appreciate it if you could go down below, hit the subscribe button as well as the little bell icon to make sure that you're notified next time I upload a video. And whilst you're down there, why not click the like button? So firstly, let's start off with what the dictionary says. So according to the dictionary, permaculture is the development of agricultural ecosystems intended to be self-sufficient or sustainable. So this is quite true, but not only is it for big agricultural scale and for big scale food production, it can also be implemented on a horticultural, smaller, gardening scale like that we use in gardens. And that's partly why I went no dig, but I'll get onto that later on in the video. I like to think of permaculture as a way of looking at how nature deals with a problem and replicating that on our scale or in our gardens or whatever space you've got. So for example, look at how maybe nature would deal with flooding or something, or how nature would deal with erosion, and you just replicate these things in your gardens then. And it's actually the best way of doing it, and you actually get bigger harvests out of it. That's what a lot of people don't realise, these people who are very traditional in their ways of gardening. These people don't really realise the benefits of actually doing it the way that nature intended, because that's what they've grown up knowing. And I decided to go no dig because it's not disturbing the soil as much, and all of these soil microbes and fungi and things like that all help to keep the soil together, stopping erosion, and they also help to keep the moisture in, because if you think about it, if you're turning the soil all the time, you're basically trying to dry it out, because that's what you do with hay if you want to dry hay out. So if you're doing that with soil, then surely you're trying to dry it out and make it less nutrient dense. One example of looking at nature and seeing how that deals with the problem and then going into your own garden is with pests. So for example, slugs. All of us hate them, gardeners, and a lot of us curse by them. But actually, what you can do is you can attract the pests in, or get the pests in, that they would normally have in nature to come and get rid of them. So for example, Bill Mollison, one of the pioneers of modern permaculture, once said, "You don't have a slug problem, you have a duck deficiency." And I think this is really true. But I don't have ducks, as you may know, but that's because I've got quite a small garden. But what this really means is that if you attract the predator in as well as the pest, that means they'll balance each other out, and that will help two people or two species in the ecosystem. And that's what some of these ecosystems are about, is all about balance. So it's the balance of predators and pests and all of the different species in the circle, so that you end up with a balanced circle where nothing really becomes a problem, because they all help the numbers of each other, if you get what I mean. It's quite confusing to get your head around, but once you do, it's actually really interesting. And like I said earlier on in this video, I tend to use permaculture in my garden in terms of not digging my garden. And the reason that this is so good is because if you look at nature, there's not really any animals that dig over the soil as much as us humans have. So why do we need to? So what you need to do is start not digging your soil, and that will really, really help your carbon footprint, because soil absorbs moisture when you don't disturb it. And it's also much better for your harvests, because the soils and everything in the soil that help the roots are all in one place, and the roots don't really have to be disturbed at all. And you may not think it, but not digging your soil and having a lot of organic matter in your soil is actually really good for drainage as well. And all the soil I've had no dig hasn't really gotten flooded or waterlogged, which is also good for plants because their soils won't get waterlogged, which is also good for plants because their roots won't get waterlogged, which will prevent so many diseases that are waterborne and soil-borne. And I know I may not be the best at explaining soil degradation and regenerative gardening and things like this, and that's why I would say that you should go and watch Kiss the Ground, which is a film on Netflix which I recently watched. And even if you're not interested in all of this, I really think you should watch it because it's very important. And it's a very, very interesting film, all about how regenerative agriculture and regenerative ways of gardening and making food and things, how they can save the planet and actually stop global warming and climate change. And I haven't got any affiliation with Kiss the Ground, but I just think it's a really, really good film and a really good way of getting a point across. And one great example, I think, of permaculture is actually Swales and Berms. And what these are is where there's bankments of soil that follow the contours of land. And a lot of drier, harsher, more arid countries use these methods, such as a lot of African countries do. When the soil gets very dry and dusty, what they do is they make these banks of soil that go along the contours of the land. And what this does is when it rains, all the water pools behind these banks, and the bit where they pool is called a swale. And that's why they're called Swales and Berms. And what the farmers then do is plant in the berm. And then when the soil infiltrates through the berm, all these roots get all the water. So even in almost deserts, you could grow just about anything because of these swales and berms. And I find that so inspiring and so interesting. And actually in the film that I mentioned earlier in this video, they have a good example of the swales and berms, or these slopes and things, I can't remember what country it was, but they actually have been proven to be effective to regenerate lost land. So land that's been desertified, where it's turned into a desert or very dusty and dry and infertile, they've actually recovered all of this soil, and that really interests me. And there's also a scheme, I think it was in San Francisco, where the waste collection, all the compost and the food scraps, all get composted and given to local farmers to spread on their land to try and regenerate and have better soil in the area. I think all of these methods are things that could be implemented all across the world if people were educated about it. And another way of using permaculture is by not having any soil that's bare all of the time. And I know I'm quite hypocritical saying this because I'm currently stood next to a garden bed that is completely bare. But what this does, and this is a new garden so it will be filled soon, but if you've always got plants in the area, number one, their roots hold all of the stuff together, all of the soil and everything in the soil, and they also help to feed all of the life in the soil. So for example, when roots break off in the ground, maybe in a wind or something, this feeds the worms and all of the microbes that go with them. And that's why I think it's great to always have something covering the ground, whether that's a mulch or whether it's a plant, a living plant. Because that's the other thing, is that mulches, whether it's hay, grass clippings, feed the soil and they feed everything in the soil. And that's why I always emphasise feeding the soil and things. So make sure that most of your soil is always covered, and even compost over the soil, that's classed as a covering. So soon I'm going to be buying some compost because I haven't got enough homemade to cover this bed, and then this bed will be covered and it will be protected from the sun. I'm not too worried at the moment because it's not really too sunny and harsh at the moment, so it should be fine, this soil. So to bring this video to an end, permaculture is essentially when you replicate natural cycles and natural ecosystems and things that go within them in your own garden. I hope you found something interesting in this video, and I know it was a bit rambly, and permaculture is a slightly new thing to me, but I thought this video, making it, would help other people and also help me understand permaculture a bit more, because I put a lot of research into this and researched into the names of people who pioneered permaculture, such as Bill Mollison. And also, I just looked at many things, especially that film, Kiss the Ground, that I mentioned earlier in the video. Thank you for watching this video. Please go down below, hit the subscribe button and the like button, as well as leave a comment if you did enjoy. Also, feel free to share this video with your friends to spread the joy of gardening and permaculture. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.